Hey everybody. Hey, I'm so grateful that you have decided to become an ERPL or an early release professional learning facilitator. I'm grateful for those of you that are in year two of this process. I'm really excited about this plan. And so today's webinar is to hopefully get you prepared for the up and coming September 17th date, which, as you know, precedes our October or November and January and February early release professional learning dates. This is going to be a kickoff and set up the wheels in motion, much like last year. If you recall, we had an all-day professional learning day, and the second half of the day got us set up for the early release professional learning. So I'm going to also remind you that the preceding email that included the mention about this webinar also told you about the setup of the September 17th date, and I'd ask you to refer to that. I'm not going to go into a lengthy description of it, but just to remind you that there are 3 sessions on that day, 2 morning sessions, and the afternoon session after lunch. The third session is the breakout session where the participants will be joining you. So let's get started and talk about what this webinar is about and how I've broken this apart into some sections so that hopefully you're getting some training and learning the process, and then also you have a resource connected to the email, attached to the email, some resources, so there'll be something provided. So let me go over the agenda. So today's webinar agenda, I'm going to briefly mention about the tech needs, your technology needs as a presenter. There are some limitations there, so I need to address them right away. And I'm going to do some reminders about Presenters Academy. The ERPL setup, location selection, that is going to pertain to a few of you. And so that is going to be something I need to talk to you about. Then I'm going to go ahead and break out into a collaborative inquiry training. So the first 3 parts is just kind of get you set up as a presenter. The next thing is what we're doing. It is actually what we did last year. I just didn't call it collaborative inquiry. I called it lesson study like, and that was to activate some prior knowledge in some of the participants. But when you see the collaborative inquiry rollout, you're going to realize it's precisely what we did last year, except I think better. I think I took a lot of feedback from the participants, and we're going to use that feedback to continuously improve this cycle of professional learning from the district science office to the teachers, and I'm super excited about it because I think it's a really solid plan. And so you're going to have a September 17th PowerPoint. You're watching this webinar, and I'm using a PowerPoint while I do this webinar, but I'm going to go off after my training, the collaborative inquiry training PowerPoint, which I will include in the email. You've seen probably. You're going to be able to use bits and pieces of that PowerPoint as needed. There's a participant PowerPoint, the September 17th PowerPoint. That'd be like your beginning template that you'll start with, and you can add to as you see necessary, enhance it, and I would encourage you to enhance it, because you'll see that I have the white background, black writing. It's nothing fancy, not a lot of images, so I encourage you to doctor it up the best you can. And then in the end I'm going to talk about the participant survey, which is absolutely critical to end your day with. Some attached resources, which this list may not include everything that's in the email that you received, but some things to look for is the attachment of the tech tools for engagement, which I got from the Presenters Academy Canvas, area of focus handout, refine areas of focus handout, and a few others are attached to your email that I don't have on this PowerPoint because I'm making the video and then I'm going to reflect on what I should attach. And to be honest with you, I'm going to add them later. So let me go ahead and get started with talking to you about the technology needs. All right, so technology needs, I'm going to remind those of you that are veterans of being a room facilitator for the ERPLs who know that we have to connect our computers to a guest projector. We're going to go into someone else's classroom, and you need a dongle. Last year, technology provided me as many of these as I needed per facilitator, and I got those out to people as they needed them. And this year, no such thing. There is no source for these. I don't know what they're expecting, but anyways, if you can get a hold of a dongle, which would be USB to VGA, so this will go right to the projector cord coming out of the wall somewhere, and this into your computer. That's one way of traveling to be a presenter. Another way is this type of one where it's a HDMI to the projector. Seen these before, I'm sure. And worst case scenario, you don't have any of those. Um, I'm going to encourage you to bring your docking box from your classroom. And I know that's going to be an inconvenience because you'll probably have a million things plugged in like I do, and it's in your wall. But this is an adapter as well. So of course this attaches to your computer to charge it and connect it to your monitor. But back there is a VGA port. And so this would be what I asked the facilitators last year that were without the adapter. Go ahead and bring this and plug it into your power source closest to your computer, and or bring your computer fully charged, and then plug the wall line from the projector into that VGA adapter. So that's the state we're in, but at least there's a solution, and that's a good thing. Another thing that is a limitation to our technology is I know in the Presenters Academy they encourage you to use videos and sound and all that. And I do not have a speaker system for everybody, nor do I have knowledge of every single room we're utilizing in all locations, whether there's a speaker system in the ceiling in the classroom that's working or if it's there at all. And so I'm just going to say if you want to embed videos, and I encourage that creativity, of course, that possibly you have your own speaker system, portable speaker system that you've plugged into your computer. Keep that in mind. I apologize. I really feel like I've asked you to be a facilitator. I should be able to provide everything you need. But I'm at my hands are tied right now as far as that. But if it's a limited need and I can find a way, I could potentially assist you. But if you could kind of take care of those needs for now, I will definitely be appreciative and grateful that you're being that creative. I think that's a really cool idea to do as much as you can. Let's go ahead and move on and just go into the reminder of the Presenters Academy. They taught us a lot of cool things, and I just want to just remind you that you should probably, if you haven't yet, go back to the Canvas site that they provided us and visit that and look at the resources. I've got a little screenshot of what they've provided below. They have the 20 strategies to engage adults, and the tech tools is going to be it's an attachment to your email because I feel like there's a one-stop shop for all kinds of links, including one of them that I'm going to utilize and ask that you do that for collaboration. Just go through that again, refresh your memory on the things that they have encouraged us to do as facilitators of a room, and I will be embedding those few little hints as we go along. Speaking of some of the things Presenter Academy showed us, I've got this slide to kind of remind us. I would really like that if you could please plan like an icebreaker of some sort minimally. Ask each person in the room to introduce themselves, maybe get some years of experience, some things that they can share out about their teaching. If you want to do a table tent thing, you roam around the room, get to know each other, bingo, something. Just keep in mind when you see the whole presentation here and all the things that we need to accomplish in the 2.5 hours, um, be informed about everything you need to do before you plan out an extensive icebreaker. So that I encourage because one thing I noticed last year in the small group formations in the rooms, a lot of teachers tend to navigate with the teachers they already know, which is okay. I really have no problem with that. Working with the teachers in their own school, maybe that opportunity was the only time they had last year to truly work with each other. So that's actually a really good thing. But I also noticed several teacher groups that work together and work together at school. And then there was a rising complaint in the surveys that we could do this at our school. Why are we doing this here? And I just had to remind those when they brought it up that they self-selected the small group. And it's true, they could have just met together, but the purpose of this collaboration is to get people you possibly wouldn't get an opportunity to collaborate with. So when we talk about that stage of your facilitation, that's going to be a critical point. It's a challenge for you to try to see if you can mix up the groups a little, but not a forced issue. Just trying to make sure. So that's kind of an important part of the icebreaker is to get people starting to be familiar with each other. And that was a good thing, if you recall, in our Presenters Academy. We sat in these family groups and things, and I got to know people, PE coaches, and all kinds of people sitting at my table, and that was kind of cool. All right, let's go into another thing they brought up, and that is a collaboration area, whether it be real in the room or in a virtual area. So you can use parking lots to put questions to the side to answer later in a process that's happening. It could be sticky notes, and I'm okay with all that. But I've set up this Padlet, which you'll see. There's the link below, and I'll ask you, and I'll remind you in a checklist in a folder. You're going to receive a folder with some materials in there, like the sign-in sheet, some few other documents that I'll need turned in, and in there will be a facilitator's checklist to make sure, have you displayed the Padlet link, somewhere, like wrote it on a board so that they can see that link the whole time they're in the room, because I'd like them to be able to post in one place from all rooms at one time. I can monitor the Padlet in real time while everything's going on. I'll let you check out what the Padlet looks like. It's nothing fancy, but it's got a label there of September 17th parking lot questions. So if every room is displaying this Padlet, went that way, then questions will pop up, and either I can answer and reply in real time right there, or if you need to solicit my to pop into your room, or you could have a participant say, hey, could someone just put on the Padlet, Jeremy, can you come by the Earth Space Science room, or come by the West Biology room for a second? We have a few questions. The fear in that is there's lots of questions, and I'm one person, and we'll see how that goes. But if I don't show up for a while, it's probably you can see on there on the Padlet whether I'm being asked to go multiple places all at once, and I'll do my best. I promise you that. Okay, so now moving on into the ERPL setup for the year, and I'm going to get myself out of the way here. Okay, now this might look familiar because we used something just like this last year, except the only difference is the East and the West locations dates are happening simultaneously at the same time. There's not two different dates for East and West. Now that works out really nicely for schools, so they all know when all the teachers are going to be gone. But it gets rather challenging for the district science office for us to be in two places at once. So just be understanding of that, and I will be at one location, and Mike Semino will be at the other location. And we'll probably flip flop. That way, I get a chance to see each room in different locations. So let's go from top to bottom. Obviously, there was some groundwork laid in August 8th, pre-planning for just kind of talking about this process. But then here we are, September 17th. There's two different parts of the day. The morning is dedicated to Canvas support, whether it be for textbooks or developing your own Canvas course. And then those three acronyms, which I don't have time to dive into right now, but maybe one, if not two, of those three acronyms look familiar to you. But it's quite possible that all three don't even look familiar to you, and you're going to be part of this training as well. And this part, that training, is with me in the auditorium, and that is going to kind of influence what goes on in the ERPL breakout sessions. One part of that should greatly influence that. And then, of course, the second half of the day is ERPL goal setting and planning for the future meeting dates. October 17th, November 28th, and January 23rd and February 27th are the dates. Locations same as last year. East location, Spruce Creek High School. West location, University High School. Now I need to talk to you about there will be a handout. This is an attachment to your email, just so you know you have this. But I also have copies of this in each room. Speaking of, I'm not going to be able to put all this information in every room. So what's going to happen is you, as a facilitator, you'll end up in the auditorium during the morning, whether it be first thing in the morning or second session in the morning. And I will have bags. I think I'll have bags, or something for your room needs. So I'll have all the copies you need and everything you're going to need, your handouts, your sign-in sheets, your everything. So that will be where I get you your supplies for your breakout room. So if you're the morning first group, just make sure you come and see me like in the very beginning or after I finish and I send everybody off to their next stop to get your facilitator bag for the breakout room. All right, back to the ERPL. This is a fact. So if you're a middle school facilitator, this does not pertain to you. If you're a biology facilitator, this does not pertain to you, as it explains um, above here, and that's what I'm going to talk about is the bottom point here. It says other high school. Well, hang on. I thought there we go. Okay, right here you'll see that it says other high school sections. This is not biology. Have one group. The group can select two alternate sites. I don't know if that even makes sense. I might have to edit. Please register for both sections right now, and Blinn will delete the non-meeting dates of each section. So let me go through an example. That is actually these on the bottom here. So again, this is just high school singleton groups, much like we had for physics, anatomy, physiology, marine science last year. The groups are really kind of small, and there wasn't enough to really justify two sections. And this year, because we have an advanced programs track for three rooms, that's going to actually divide up chemistry, biology, and environmental science a little bit into a less population. So this means you, as an ERPL facilitator, I first and foremost am I do realize that some of you teach on the west. And if your group decides to meet on the east for one of the dates, that means you will have to drive over to the east. And right now, I am saying, thank you for understanding. This is going to be a sensitive issue. And I will show you in my PowerPoint for the participants when I think it should be addressed, but you could totally adjust and do it at a different time in the training. Um, but so what I'm asking on this day is that I need everybody to sign up for their ERPLs at this time. So whether if you're the, oops, I didn't mean to do that. If you're the middle school teacher or you're the biology teacher, the sections are up here that I'll need them to agree upon, or there's no agree upon, just sign up for the East or sign up for the West, and you're done. This group down here, if you're Earth Space, have them sign up for both sections. That's not going to make a lot of sense because they're happening at the same time in two different locations. But what you can explain to them is what it says down there is it will then register your whole group for both locations. But you're not going to go to both locations each day. You're going to pick, um, you're going to submit a form, and I'll show you here in a second. Here you go. You're going to submit a form that looks like this, where this will be turned in with your sign-in sheets in the folder, and it's going to ask you to facilitate a discussion between your participants to say on location on October 17th, where are we going to meet? Are we going to meet in the east location or the west location? So circle what they've agreed upon. This will be important to facilitate carefully. It's going to make some people not so happy. Um, the only way I can justify, the only way I can explain it, and you can blame me, I'm the fall guy, is that the group is not large enough to break into two. And the more minds that are together, the better in this particular process that we're doing. And I'm ready to field the complaints, but there's nothing I can do about it. Plus, I don't have a crystal ball ahead of time to find out how many people will be selecting certain courses, especially since so many of you teach multiple different courses. I don't know which one you're going to pick for the ERPL, and these decisions are made before the end of last school year on how many sections, how many ERPL facilitators, etc. So I appreciate your understanding because you're part of this. You're a participant as well as the facilitator, and so I right now up front thank you for understanding, um, and totally understand if you have a complaint. But this is going to be the way I have to facilitate such a large scale deployment of this process. Okay, so I'm going to move on into the training now, and the training is about this. So get ready. And here we go. All right, so the process we're utilizing this year is called collaborative inquiry, and it is exactly what we were doing last year, except I've tried to fine tune it to have it make more sense to the teachers and make it have them understand that is really not an extra thing they have to do. But this totally blends in perfectly with the inevitable. They have to work on a DPP learning cycles for the year. So this should marry together perfectly, and it should be really obvious. So I'm going to go ahead and utilize this PowerPoint now, and you'll see that anything in this PowerPoint is going to be fair game, and some of these slides will be utilized in the participant PowerPoint. I'm going to include this PowerPoint in your email. And if there's a slide that I talk about and use, and don't add it in the participant PowerPoint, the one that's for September 17th, go ahead and copy paste, put it in the one you think that's and for some reason I didn't include your. It's totally like cut paste, put things in. But let me go through the agenda. So collaborative inquiry process overview and the rationale. That's what I'm going to start with, of course. And then you're going to see why these make sense. So I have some time for individual thinking in the class. And so the teachers will have to kind of self-reflect. This will be like where you can utilize what were you planning on for a learning cycle this year. By the time they meet September 17th, that process is probably already started, and there might be some things that the school improvement plans are influencing the teachers to dive into. I know that collective efficacy is made its way through the a lot of schools, and maybe there's a book study going on. This there could be a way to have this all marry together and work in another small group outside of your own school. Um, and then refining the area of focus. So today's goal is an area of focus, and then potentially an inquiry question if they can get to that far. The last thing on there you'll see is fill out an area of focus and feedback survey. This is imperative that they end with this part. It's a real easy process. There's only 5 questions that are required to answer. I believe there's 12 total, but much of them are feedback questions of the process. So if they have nothing to provide, then they're done in 5 questions. So let me go ahead and start with this. What are the goals of collaborative inquiry process, and why might it be valuable to teachers? Check this out. I got the answer to the questions in the notes of the PowerPoint, and I'm going to read them to you, and I apologize for that, but it's something I just want you to know that this is the resource. So what are the goals of collaborative inquiry process? The goals are for the opportunities for colleagues at any level to work together to identify common challenges, implement a plan, analyze data, and assess the impact. So rather than be a new set of work, this process is meant to support as a support to the teachers with something they may already be considering for new learning for the DPP learning cycle or cycles. It's an opportunity to undertake facilitated collaboration, and that's you, the ERPL room facilitator, with a small group of peers focus on a mutually agreed upon area of focus. I thought you might like to see that I've included these talking points. So why are we excited about this process? Frankly, I don't know if you are excited, but here's the deal. Remember what we learned in the Presenters Academy? One, we need to enter everything positively. So if you could use those words, saying, hey, we're starting something and we're all doing this, we're all in this together, and let's be positive about this because I think this is something great. And also remember, if you can pepper in some sort of way to crack a joke, whether it be a bad joke or a good joke, remember the laughter, your body physiologically doesn't know the difference between a fake laugh and a real laugh. The positive responses from your body happen nonetheless. So it's just a little thing to kind of remind you from the Presenters Academy. And I think it means everything, especially in the setup these are in. It's challenging for you and the teacher participants, fellow teacher participants, I should say, um, after teaching in the early release schedule, and then having to drive to a location to then do this. I would dream that they can't wait to get with their group and work together on this. And I did see a lot of positive groups last year that were like kind of hurrying to get to their work with their colleagues, and that was really cool. It wasn't the case for everybody, and I don't know that I can hit 100% satisfaction guarantee, but I'll tell you what, they're going to look for you for setting the tone in the room. And so I appreciate everything you can do, and I don't want you to fake anything, but definitely be optimistic about this, and you're going to see why here in a second, because this is actually a pretty killer process. Here we go. All right. This is collaborative inquiry, and I am going to give this a little adjustment because I can see that it's cut off. All right. So this is we'll say the symbol that explains the collaborative inquiry process. So you can see here that ERPLs and goal setting, that's today. So we're hoping that we can get to a point by the end of this day that the small groups will get together in groups of areas of focus. So I'll explain that in more detail. And then they start working out some planning. When you move into this process right here, implementation, that's where you implement changes in the practice through collaborative lesson planning. So this is all about diving into some new learning and have it make an impact to a lesson plan. And the lesson plan would be obviously developed with your colleagues. Now, what do you do when you develop this lesson plan? You have to purposely have ways in the lesson plan to collect evidence, as it mentions qualitative and quantitative about impact to student learning. So thinking way ahead of time as to when we're embedding some new learning into a lesson plan, that we're going to purposely figure out a way during that lesson to retrieve information from the students, and that's by things we call artifacts. The artifacts are student work. It's just a fancier way to say student work. Um, there we go. Sorry, small adjustment here. Okay, so they collect. So then the small group will then collectively examine the student artifacts for evidence of student learning. Did the new learning of the teachers embedded in the lesson planning make a difference in student learning, student achievement? Qualitative and quantitative data should be procured if possible. Drawing conclusions and documenting learning. What does that mean? We'll go over that in more detail. And now, last one, and this is the perfect world scenario, is revise a lesson plan and actions based on the learning. So reteach the lesson to determine if the impact of the lesson adjustments, if the impact, sorry, of the impact of lesson adjustments. It's probably best explained in this flow chart. I'm going to show you whole screen here. Sorry for the bump here in the presentation. There we go. So proposed timeline. This will also be a handout because this will be probably the only documentation that teachers will walk out with that kind of explains the September through February process. So September, let's go through this together. The proposed timeline. So in September 17th, that's today, or the day of the first day we're doing this, and that's Introduction to Collaborative Inquiry Process. So you're going to be utilizing some of these slides that are in the September 17th PowerPoint and use them to explain this process. Each teacher will select an area of focus. Much like last year, the area of focus was basically, I said, pick a standard that is difficult to teach or difficult for students to learn, and see if teachers could get around in small groups to say, yes, I'd like to spend time working on this science standard that we all teach and work together and developing more understanding of the pedagogy that's best practice in teaching that standard, what some misconceptions are, et cetera, et cetera. And that still can be done. That can still be one of the ways to anchor on ideas for a small group to get together. Nothing wrong with that. But the idea will be elaborated here in the other PowerPoint, but I want you to know that area of focus is how the large group will be divided into small groups based on a common area of focus. So they may actually be able to do that and then some on September 17th, but there could be some people or groups that just can't lock in on one idea yet. Kind of ready for that, but I'm by the end of the day with you on the 17th, their exit survey, their survey is going to ask them to declare an area of focus and who their small group members are, and if they have, that's from every person, every individual ideally will submit that. On October 17th, they would be setting up an inquiry by developing the inquiry question. So if they were to, it's better to kind of see some examples of what their area of focus can be. And let me go ahead and do that. So this will be a handout. It's in your, it'll be in your participant bag and also, or your facilitator bag. And this is an area of focus ideas. As you can see from top to bottom, There's the original science standard that everyone can, a small group can lock together on. Maybe there's a person doing a book study already because the school's encouraging a certain book, and maybe they'd like to continue on and work with somebody in their room. Argument-driven inquiry, sorry, ADI, that's going to be discussed in the morning sessions, and as well as the science and engineering practices, the green box there. And so that might stimulate some thinking to dive into some new learning there. 5E lesson is always something that's kind of worth going into. And in the participant PowerPoint, we're going to go through what each one of these little arrows says. But the bottom one says other ideas your group may come up with. So this is not a limiting list that they have to pick one of these things. There's so many other things that I have not listed here. Um, so totally open. But the idea behind this is if they're gonna do something for their learning cycle for DPP, that could be what the area of focus is, and then they will figure out how to develop an inquiry question and embed the new learning into a lesson planning. So the idea behind this is, I'll zoom in on, let's say, like the book study. Right there it says, so will the book provide you ideas to embed into your lesson plans? If so, this is a great idea to work with a small group to learn more about lesson ideas that can be implemented into a classroom. Collaboratively develop a lesson plan utilizing the Instructional Practice Guide, IPG, for guidance to teach in your respective classrooms. The IPG is a tool for lesson planning, kind of a somewhat of a checklist, if you will, and that I'm going to go over in the early morning early morning session with me. So this will be a new term for a lot of people, but it is something that we're going to will be a tool in your classroom. So over here it says the ERPLs are time to develop. They're time to collaborate, develop a lesson plan that implements a change in practice. The change in practice is what this new learning is influencing. What we learn should impact student achievement, student learning. So what are we learning over here to embed in a lesson plan with each other's, a collective lesson. And this gray box represents, then we teach it in our own classrooms, and then we come back to the ERPLs in a sequence, and then we collectively examine the student artifacts. Then we can draw some conclusions. We can revise our lesson plan and potentially reteach it. So then we go back to the flow chart that I was going over. So you can see after the October, where the collaborated lesson plan should start based on some new learning, it'll continue in November, working on a lesson plan and embedding some new learning in there and having a plan to collect evidence from student learning, that's the student artifacts, using the qualitative, like observations, collecting metacognitive data of student learning, and quantitative data, like something like number correct or incorrect in a particular formative assessments. Teach the collaborated lesson. So this is a goal, but it may or may not work out. But in between the November and the January 23rd purple, if the lesson was taught in everyone's respective classroom so that student artifacts could be brought back to the third ERPL, and then teachers can look at each other's students' work, and this is the types of questions that would be asked and answered based on the student artifacts. Was the area of focus or inquiry question impactful on student learning? How do you know? Draw conclusions and document learnings to revise a lesson. Revise a lesson plan and actions based on learnings. Reteach the lesson to determine the impact of the lesson adjustments. So maybe it doesn't make sense to actually go back and reteach a lesson again, especially when it's a few months later. But what if it was a particular process or technique or something that was learned? Maybe it was a formative classroom technique, assessment technique, and so like sticky bars, it's getting students prior knowledge on a some sort of a formative assessment. Well, that technique could maybe be utilized again, but in a different with a different standard and a different lesson. Just throwing something out there, so a lot of this area of focus is maybe a process. Maybe it's not reteaching a science standard that you once taught, but if they didn't get it the first time around, it might not be a bad idea to go ahead and do a revisit. So by the last ERPL, you debrief the implementation of the revised lesson. Did it provide the student learning that your group anticipated? And then many some groups did this. I can't say many for sure, but some groups in the facilitated some facilitators did a whole group discussion. So on the last day, this one I will preview. Will kind of I'll prepare you for this to facilitate a whole group debrief, and these would be the area like have everyone kind of state the minimum. What was your area of focus? What was the inquiry question? What was the evidence of student learning? So they have to actually dive into their lesson plan a little bit and what the students actually created to provide some evidence of learning. This could include here's what the lesson was, here's what we were anticipating the student thinking and learning. This is what they told us first time around. If in fact you got a chance to do like a reteach, a revise, and a reteach, then you would include that in here, which ultimately gives you to some conclusions. The conclusions of what did your new learning, how did that impact? You still have more learning to go through. Um, it'll just be a good like share out. And there were some pretty powerful things said in the share outs last year. So that's a goal. Of course, by that time, it's the fourth ARPL. People are pretty tired, and we're heading into full-fledged testing season in a couple months, and so everyone's starting to feel that. But just something to think about. Okay, so that's like the quick overview of collective efficacy. So, oh my gosh, hang on, start over. Of collaborative inquiry. So many words this year, right? This again, we're just going to be diving into the process we did last year, but just with like more of a like some visual markers and some more openness as to selection rather than me pigeonholing people into a science standard. I want them to be right into um, diving into a process or something they want to learn more about and something they probably already have planned on learning about. In your participant PowerPoint, not this training, not this one. This is going to be a slide that is presented before the end, so they know that this is coming. In the survey at the end of the day, I'm going to include these three bullet points are included. What questions do you have about the collaborative inquiry process? What about the collaborative inquiry process feels like it would support you in making meaningful progress with your DPP learning cycles? And what would you want to change about this process to make it more helpful and meaningful? This is under the optional answer, answering surveys. There's a few other ones to have optionally answered, but that is basically me soliciting feedback to help clarify. In this survey, it's not anonymous. They start off with saying their name and where they teach, and they state the area of focus and who the members of their small group are. I'll go over this in a second. You'll see the actual survey. But let me end with this. This is a slide that you'll be posting after you do a quick overview of collective, there I go again, collaborative inquiry and the individual thinking and focus area. This is what you're going to end up facilitating, and then we'll talk about the group share out part, refining the area of focus with your small group. Have them sit together in their areas of focus, and there's a document to help them work through the finessing of their area of focus, and then ultimately, if they can get to a point of developing an inquiry question, that'd be great. But there's a handout that they're going to utilize. This is the handout actually. It's going to remind them that the strongest areas of focus are things that, and here's what they say. So you can kind of peruse through that. And then also at the end of the very last thing is this: to fill out the area of focus survey, start a plan for learning. These are questions in the survey. What resources do you need? Who will bring them? What support does your small group need? If, for instance, there's a small group that is doing a particular lesson or a book study, there's 4 people and they're the only people doing a book study in all of the rooms. It's potentially I could get them the book, but if it's like 50 small groups all doing even the same book, I don't have any budget for that a large amount of purchase. So this is where if they can just go ahead and kind of make it like put the wish list out there and we'll see what I can do. Otherwise, if they're talking about a book study, everyone must imply that their own professional learning, they're going to have to take charge and probably get the book themselves if they haven't already. So just so you know, that's how you kind of phrase it. Just put that down as a wish list. So Jeremy will see what he can do. But if you're gonna commit to a book, then you might actually have to buy it yourself, and that's just it's professional learning. Okay, so we're about 40 minutes into this webinar, and we've gone over the ERPL plan and the selection of the region, the locations for some of the groups. We've also mentioned some of the resources from Presenters Academy and the technology needs of your room and what you'll need to bring. But this is an exciting point in the webinar because I'm explaining to you what I have right here explained in this slide. Part of this process includes an opportunity. I am securing money from Title II to offer a limited number of small groups. Small groups are defined by 3 to 6 people. 3 to 6 people. So if you have groups getting together in the room under the same area of focus, and there's 7 of them, encourage them to break into a group of 3 and 4. Too many a group of anything 6 and above, it gets a little hard for individuals to contribute, and 6 is on the upper end of that. But for groups, this is what I'm going to offer. So that cycle that is involved in this, where there's an implementation, and then the implementation goes into measuring the impact of the new learning into the lesson, and then of course then there's the learning. How do you know what was learned? By examining those artifacts and then ultimately making an adjustment. Here's the cool thing. If you have ever been part of a lesson study group, especially when I facilitated, you'll know that that actual teach day, you're actually going into implementation. Then you have a measure, and then you have the learning. The group will debrief, and then we even can do an adjustment to the lesson plan and do a reteach. So in fact, that's what I've proposed. I've proposed for some funding to allow a certain number of groups this is out of all the groups in both middle school and high school and East and West. But on October 17th, when we get together for that ERPL, there will be a form that a small group can receive. And if they are interested in this, that if they fill out this form, and it might be a survey monkey or it might be an actual form, they fill out this form, and there's going to be quite a bit to fill out as far as what's their area of focus, what's their inquiry question, how is it embedded in a lesson, what is not the whole lesson doesn't have to be written out, but a lesson rationale, and then what's their plan on the teach day. So here's the thing. One of those members of the small group would volunteer to teach the lesson in their classroom. The other teachers, no matter where they teach at, could go to that school that day and watch the lesson happen with the host teacher students within mind that the teachers are going to be watching and listening to the students to collect evidence. That's where that qualitative evidence can come from, hearing and listening what the students are saying, grabbing the artifacts and possibly throwing together the quantitative, going this many right out of this many, and getting those together. And then in a debrief, changing the lesson a little bit and then do a reteach. It all can be done. It's been done many, many times before with me, and I can provide guidance with groups, but I will provide like a model example as far as how to do that in one day. But if you go through that, you'll notice that in one day, after the collaborative lesson plan is developed, you can have an implementation, a measure to learn, and a reteach, which is the adjustment, all in one day. So that's something that you can, this slide is actually in the participant PowerPoint. And if you have any trouble explaining that, just know that it'll be part of the October 17th ERPL, an application. So that'll motivate. Some of these teachers have done lesson study before. Many have expressed they wish they could go see someone else teach. They wish they could go in another classroom or go just visiting another school. You get so many different ideas. So that's an exciting tidbit to share here. And so that I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. And now I'm going to go ahead and dive into the participant PowerPoint, the one that you'll be utilizing. And keep in mind, the one that I used preceding just now was one about collaborative inquiry. So if for some reason there's a slide on that I didn't include in the participant one that you think would be a powerful one to utilize to explain collaborative inquiry, then go ahead and pull it over there to the PowerPoint. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over.